Will there be a World War III in that regard? Will we end up with that level of death, or is it going to be a transformational thing at the eschaton level, the way that Terence McKenna thought it might be? I don't know, and I don't know the one precludes the other. You can still have transformation of your consciousness as you leave Materium, even leaving this particular body. And we may be going through one of those kind of events where a great number of us will choose not to reincarnate for whatever reason. And that kind of thing is certainly within what McKenna was talking about in the compression of the time that we've got. The shunning article was specifically focused on the idea that an action needs to have a response. A violent action need not have a violent response, but by not responding, not only are we at a surface level encouraging further violent responses, but by not responding, we're not generating any of the counter waves that will be necessary for future actions that they're going to take. So they can, at this point, because there's not been a huge global outcry and a rushing of people into Japan to pour boron onto the reactor, and a heroic effort the way they did in Chernobyl, at that national level, they can assume that we'll be compliant, that the sheeple will be compliant the next time they set off a whole slew of these things in whatever their next adventure is, which may be New Madrid. And so there's a lot of nuke plants that will be affected if the New Madrid earthquake goes, and it's of a severity to cause infrastructure disruption. And those nuke plants will further exacerbate the whole situation between the boundary of the equator and 50 North. The jet stream now appears to be isolating 50 North, so we may yet see that there's an actual physical manifestation of that. And if the powers that be have their way, I'm quite certain that now is the time that they want to have us all depart in a great, huge mass. And the reasoning behind it is kind of the following. Whether you think we're a prison planet or anything along those lines, we're a finite set of resources, and their management style is such that we're consuming more resources than exist. And we've reached the point where we're about to have an ecological crash. It's easier for them to deal with us if there's fewer of us during that period of time, because necessarily there will end up being few of us, and they just don't want to have us take them out on our way down, so to speak. And that's my current understanding of how things are unfolding.
Okay. Was the data picking up, or in your latest run, anything happening in the New Madrid zone?
That was the part of the thing that made the markets entity extremely intriguing, was that in the previous SHAPE report, we discussed a financially shaking earthquake, an earthquake that changed the international arrangement relative to currency. Whatever that may be, I don't know. And that's showing up within the markets entity this last time in the report that got eaten. And it was part of the 9 pages I'd done so far relative to that. And I don't know how many pages would have been devoted to the market entity. It was so large relative to to its previous size. But yes, there was indication of that earthquake manifesting within the period of time after the solstice. So theoretically within our summer. Because we're looking at a cone, we can't really tell. The earthquake information I'm always reminded of the situation with the Sumatran tsunami, where we had earthquake information that was all jumbled up, and it was basically the description for the earthquake that struck the Scott Peterson trial in California was jumbled up in the information that came out that was also describing the Sumatran earthquake. So when the Scott Peterson trial happened and some of the language manifest, we thought at that time, oh, that was it. The whole earthquake had happened and we were done with it. And then later on, some 6 months later, the Sumatran earthquake happens and the rest of the language was fulfilled. That is sort of give you an idea of what the effect of looking through the cone can be. So we don't know yet if that's, again, the same kind of situation relative to the earthquake. We have data showing that there's an earthquake that's going to show up after the solstice, maybe very soon after the solstice, so end of June, that is going to be disruptive to the international currencies. Now, is this going to be a big New Madrid kind of thing that's going to hit us at that level? I don't know. It may just be something that's a strategic quake somehow that is a prelude, and maybe some months later then we'll get hit with a larger quake. There's some indication within the data set before it got eaten up that we were again looking at that Scott Peterson and Sumatran tsunami kind of a cone developing. So that's kind of why I think, yeah, there's a New Madrid stuff showing up, but there may be a significant earthquake ahead of that.
Okay. So along with these possibilities, whether it's the New Madrid or some other location in the U.S., and what you spoke of, the energies directed inwards towards the States now, you have previously mentioned the notion of American karma and spoken in the past with much emotion about what you've picked up in the data regarding the destruction of the people and your country, the U.S., and the aftermath of future events. It seems to me that we in the Western world have lived with such a sense of entitlement and that things should be so good, when so many in other parts of the world have suffered all along for that sense of entitlement, fueling the Anglo-American empire. We've supported these policies and actions in one way or another, even if only by apathy or silence. Can you offer or ignorance, right? Can you offer more of your insight into your understanding of these events? Like it or not, your words hold weight and measure to those of us who participated in your work.
I'm just a pie baker who fell into something and got really ticked off and started a project that's gotten totally out of hand, people.
Well, we'd still like to hear what you'd have, what you have to say at this point in time.
Well, it's curious you bring it up, because just today I had to drive into town, a relatively rarity kind of a thing for me. I've been doing more of that since I've got the crew here, but just today I was thinking about the ability of me to move my atoms through space at a level that is basically unknown outside of the Anglo-American Empire. And it's unknown through a wide variety of causes, but it is symptomatic. Our acceptance of and our ease of living with the idea that, oh yeah, I can drive my humongous El Gigantico vehicle here, and so what if I only get 20 miles to a gallon? And I'm thinking, okay, well, there's still some 4 billion people that don't have that freedom of movement on this planet. And that this level of I didn't think of it as in terms of the entitlement, but I thought of it in terms of the lack of the entitlement, in terms of the impact that has on the social order of those parts of the planet where walking is still the primary method of moving around. And it's a calorie versus machinery kind of a thing, which led again to another thought that American karma is about to go back to a period of time where the idea of someone driving an SUV from house to house to house in a rural environment to deliver a newspaper will be absurd, and that it will go back to the situation as had been described in the 2000 reports and 2001 and so on, of a calorie economy where the calories inherent in the diesel fuel to drive the SUV are so much more precious and harder to obtain than the calories that are necessary for a kid to pedal a bike, and we'll go back to almost that level of some component of our infrastructure. And it's occurring around us all over the place. We're having those levels of breakdowns that are going to force us back to that. So our karma is not instant by any mean, but it probably is at a civilization level, 200 plus years being a relatively short span of time. But we're about to get smacked really hard this year by karma, and you'll see the social order change around us, even down to the level of how newspapers are delivered and whether or not they continue to even exist at all, or the internet, that kind of thing, because there will be power levels and or power problems and shifts caused at all different kinds of levels within our social order.
So again, Clif, you would see this as a balancing.
The whole universe is all about that. Yeah. Look, you look at the metaphor anywhere you care to go, in any of the abstractions that humans place on their observation of universe, call it archaeology, oceanography, physics, any of it, you'll see that all of them are all about equations. Basically, they try and all reduce them to math, and all the equations come back to everything is cyclic and everything is trying to find a nice harmonious balance from our viewpoint. And so we think of entropy as being negative and growth as being positive. And in one of our abstractions, it's linear. But we really do recognize that you can't have growth without destruction, and therefore it's all part of the same cycle, all bound up. And it's all inextricably glued together. One must, as a necessity, feel the pain of holding rage as one might hold a hot coal. In order to be able to transfer that pain to someone else, you've got to feel it first. So it's really, it must exist. That's just the way the universe is structured. In order for there to be me causing pain somewhere else, I must first experience it. So, George Bush, the future reformed cheerleader pedophile president of the United States, must have suffered greatly in order to be able to explode small frogs and take joy from it. And it was the universe at some level that is attempting to seek a balance of him trying to express that pain in exploding the small frogs, right? Now, he creates ripples out that the Buddhists would say probably should not have been gone out, and it'll come back in a karmic fashion. But nonetheless, even karma is its own way an attempt for universe to balance itself out. I think, of course, that even universe knows that achieving balance is, from our viewpoint, not a good thing. Because when everything was balanced, there would be no movement.
Right. Thanks very much for all of your thoughts, Clif. Thank you.
Hi, Clif. This is Gemini again.
Yeah.
You had touched lightly on, in the interview, about humanity not waking up and not wanting to know what is happening even as they're going off a cliff. Based on all of your research, has there ever been a time when humanity hasn't been controlled? And in your opinion, what do you think it will take for humans to truly evolve and either coexist with the powers that were, or to not even have the powers that were in our lifetimes and just existing, period?
I don't know what it'll take for us to get beyond them. I know that we can't really coexist with them anymore because it's a net, reducing everything to math again, it's a net negative game in the sense that until it's all concentrated, all the wealth, all the power is concentrated into extremely narrow hands, which is an extreme state. And so we must have an explosion or a tearing down from the outside in order to liberate that energy and spread it out in a balancing kind of an effect. So we won't live with the current crop of the powers that be for much longer. I don't know what the initiatory process or spark will be. It's really, I do believe there certainly is a point where humanity as a whole was not as controlled as it is now, although subsets were controlled in fierce ways, and they've demonstrated that to us. So, for instance, at the same time that we had a flowering of individualism in the Chinese sphere of influence, we had the Mayans in this huge, rigid reptile cult killing vast quantities of their own people in the mind control effort that if they only satisfied the reptile god's insatiable desire for blood, everything would be peace, light, and the birds would sing again. And so they were obviously controlled and really dominated by reptile thinking, and at the same time the Chinese were not. We don't see it as spreading around the populace globally at the same way at that particular time in humanity. But I would say that probably represented the last time that we were an organic species in a small sense, in the sense that we were not a homogeneously mind controlled. And you can no longer say that. I mean, the poor Chinese fellow laboring in an iPad factory where he has to sign a statement pledging not to suicide over the terrible conditions is every bit as mind controlled and suffered in the mind control from the same sources as somebody who's cube farmed in a Bank of America telemarketing center. And same as in an insurance cube farm, etc. So we're all now under a global system. And again, it's reached an extreme, and as all Taoists know, when any cycle reaches an extreme, the pendulum swings back the other way. So we're about to go back through, and we'll briefly arc through that narrow part of balance before we go back to the other way. Will it require